Okay, so my name is Sean Robinson. I'll tell you a little bit about the charity that I run in a minute on the next slide, but I'm just going to take 10-15 minutes to talk broadly about the kind of support that's out there for people who are struggling with drugs and alcohol, maybe family members, loved ones and so on. So quite a light touch, and we'll look at some of the indicators where someone might have a problem, and then some of the support services that are available in Islington. Just as I get into this, just for context, I'm in recovery from alcoholism myself, so I'm 14 years sober, and so I like to think I'm talking from personal experience about what it's like. So I just think it's worthwhile that you all know that. So this is the charity that I run. It's called Rehabit. We're very small. We work in the gaps. Sometimes it's those people who can't engage with some of the services, or they're falling through the gaps in the mental health system, or they're stuck in it. So as I said, we're very small, but we offer 26 weeks of counselling all around abstinence from the drug or the alcohol, and peer support from people with lived experience. So it's a niche offer, and I can always talk if anyone's interested in knowing more. We pride ourselves on this as well, because we're small, we can be agile, we can go where people need help. So we don't have a centre, we will go and meet people for coffee in the community. I'm always up and down up the street in and out the coffee shops, so it's a nice thing to be able to do, to go where people need the help. We don't have waiting lists, we respond immediately. I probably won't say much about 12-step fellowship, but that's AA and Narcotics Anonymous and things like that. But I can talk a little bit about it as we get in. And we give people more than one chance. Getting help with drugs and alcohol is really difficult sometimes. Not everyone gets it first time. So we take a very tolerant and patient approach with people. So that's a little bit about what we do, though. And actually, I will comment on that last one. We don't judge. It feels sad in a way that we should say that, but a lot of people I know, and I struggled to ask for help because I was convinced I was going to be judged, and I felt full of shame and guilt, and that stops so many people from asking for help. And that's the most powerful thing anyone can do, is ask for help. So let's move into. Okay, let's start with some misconceptions or myths. So that first one there, people who struggle with alcohol are weak and lack willpower. I hear that all the time. I don't know if anyone thinks that or believes that in this room, but what we're dealing with here is an extremely powerful substance. And more often than not, a lot of people, when they're not drinking for fun, they're not drinking for relaxation, they're drinking for a reason, and that can often be to deal with grief, to deal with trauma, to deal with childhood issues, to deal with unhappiness in a relationship, and that's a powerful thing to take away that feeling, and alcohol does that. And some of the most competent, influential, funny, interesting people with willpower I've ever met are people I know who have struggled with alcohol and drugs, and it takes a different kind of strength to deal with it. So I just wanted to acknowledge that first one. Second one, you have to drink every day to have a problem. Not true, not true. I didn't drink every day until I did drink every day, but I still had the problem. I see a lot of people who binge drink that can still have a problem. Some people may drink out of anxiety in social occasions. Might not be a problem, but it could be. But this idea of having to drink every day, it's a myth. When it comes down to it, it's, does somebody want to stop? And can they stop? And if they can't and they need help, that may be the time to get involved with a support service. Third one, using one drug always leads to harder drugs. I have so many conversations with parents about this one, either through the charity or through friends or in the community. It can be true, right? Let's not pretend it can't be. But generally it isn't. The idea of someone having a bit of cannabis, some MDMA, a bottle of cider, it doesn't mean it's always going to lead on to something else. Cannabis does not automatically lead to crack cocaine or heroin or anything like that. And it's a worry, an understandable worry that parents have, but it's often a rite of passage, and there are other factors involved and indicators if someone may be having a problem. So I just thought, I've got loads more of those, but I just thought I'd cover off three just to get us going and set the tone. I think this is an interesting slide. So possible impact of drugs and alcohol. There's lots more than this, but I've just picked a selection out to go through this afternoon. So is it affecting your relationship? So that could be the relationship with your parent, it could be with your sisters, with your children, colleagues. It's an early sign that it may be having a drink to be able to deal with them. It may be having a drink after dealing with them. But either way, sometimes it's a good sign that the relationship with family is a start. Is your performance or work or at college suffering? I mean, that was certainly something I experienced. I went from having a very good promotion to 2 years later nearly losing my job. I just couldn't handle it anymore. You know, my performance struggled at work, my relationship struggled, everything started to collapse. And sometimes what you might see is people can be very capable, competent, do the job. I mean, the way I used to look at it is I could juggle lots of things, 5 balls in the air, and then life threw another couple at me. You know, my dad got ill, something else happened, and suddenly I can't do it anymore. It all falls to the ground. So impact on performance is an indicator. Have you started to use drugs or drink earlier in the day, or even later in the day? I mean, now we're starting to build through the indicators into bigger ones now, because that was a sign, that certainly was for me. You know, I would set my alarm clock to 3 o'clock in the morning to get drunk enough to be able to do a call at 8 o'clock the next morning. That's when I kind of realised I needed help and had a problem. But gradually, the drinking before that got earlier and earlier, and I tell myself a false narrative that this was the right thing. I justify it in all sorts of reasons. I work hard. It's Saturday, I'm on holiday. If I was in Benidorm, I'd be having a drink now, so why don't I have a drink at 12 o'clock? And before you know it, it's 10 o'clock. So they're all signs. And this last one, maybe last thing midnight, is quite an interesting one as well, especially with cannabis, often considered an innocent drug, and it is for many. You know, it's got all sorts of cultural connections, but normally for me, an indicator that somebody needs something to sleep. It's the start of a story. Why do they need that? What is it that's happening at night? What's the intrusive thinking? What is it that the cannabis is helping them to make go away? So all of these signs start to tell a story. Do you think about drugs in between using them? I'm going to give a quote here, kind of, from the James Bond novels, who was actually a raging addict. If anyone's... He was a sociopath, psychopathic, alcoholic, gambling, drug addicted, love addicted, serial, we know what he was serial at. So James Bond, a hero for many, has got every ism going. And the quote in the book is, Bond's favourite drink of the day was the drink in his head before the first drink of the day. Alcoholic! So, but that is a big thing. We start to obsess and think, when am I going to get the next drink? When am I going to have my next smoke? Have you tried to stop, but find you can't? Now we're getting into the really bigger stuff, you know, that's where it is. I mentioned earlier about daily drinking, or if it's binge, it doesn't matter. If somebody wants to stop and they can't, that's a kind of time to ask for help. Is it in secret? Again, you can see how we're moving up the chain here. That's the first sign that there's guilt or shame associated with it. You don't want people to see. And the lies I would tell to hide my drinking. My parents thought I had hay fever. I didn't. It was something else that was making my nose run. They thought I had urine infection all the time. I was just going to the toilet to top up and drink vodka in the toilet. So all these lies and these secrets start to really feel heavy. Are you spending money on alcohol when you should be spending it on other necessary items? It could be food, household items. So that's a point of desperation then, really, because it is becoming the number one priority in our lives. So there's more around this. Just gonna have a little drink of water. It is water. Well, the amount of times, I mean, my mum was alive then, she'd be sniffing my bottle of water, and I thought, oh, come on, let's have some trust. I've been sober for 2 years. So hopefully there's some food for thought there about, you know, what may help, and what signs to look out for. Right. So just a quick snapshot then of some of the resources out there. I think people sometimes forget the GP as the first port of call. I know there are some good GPs, some better than others, but the GP should be a pretty good, you know, start point. Kevin's going to talk about Better Lives shortly, but there are borough services. If you have people, friends and loved ones outside Islington, talk to Frank, has all the resources you would ever need about the different supports in different boroughs. Rehabit, I've told you a bit about us. Swim is an interesting one. I don't know a massive amount about them, but they're a fairly large organisation. They primarily work with people from the black community or ethnic groups, and they have group sessions, and you know, they're very, you know, worth knowing about. Swim Enterprises. 12-step recovery, I'm not going to say too much about that, but Alcoholics Anonymous, Narcotics Anonymous, they help save my life and keep it safe now. And there's a lot of myth about what goes on in there, but I don't think that's for now. But again, at the end, I'm happy to talk if anyone's interested. And then continuing support from recovery groups. You know, that could be the AA, it could be, I think Kevin, you have Eagle eager recovery. There's other groups that can create social connections, because social connection is really important, because most people I know struggle, isolate and hide. And that big step about coming back into the community, finding your voice, having that connection, that feeling of self-worth. There is no way on this planet I could have held a microphone 14 years ago. I hid every time I had to speak in public. I just could not do it. I couldn't look anyone in the eye. I couldn't talk coherently. Now I can, and that's recovery in action. So what might support look like? Sometimes people are fearful of this because they don't know. And this is a menu of options. You know, it can start intimately, one-to-one. It's confidential, and then you can start opening up, getting that professional advice on detox. So, for example, in Rehabit, we don't do detox, but there are people we can still help if they're ready. And create that trusting environment where people, one addict, no, I'm going to take that back. One person struggling with alcohol or drugs can talk to someone else. Group sessions, interesting, very important, but some people can't do it. And some people can. So it is a big part of the recovery experience. Lived experience, I think I've talked about that quite a bit throughout this, that talking to someone who understands the challenges is really, really important. And counselling, that's something we offer as well. And that's not easy to get sometimes, but we offer 26 weeks, which is a pretty good deal. But counselling really helped me. That's when I stopped playing the game and actually trying to con the counsellor that fits me, and actually told the truth. And suddenly, once I told the truth, all sorts of magic happened. And then it can also be helped with practical issues, social connection. I mean, most people we work with, they may have issues with benefits, with housing, with employment. So all of these things are connected as a holistic solution. I think Kevin will talk a bit about that as well. Just one thing on 12 steps. I think there's an idea a lot of people have if they do go that they're forced to talk. They're forced to talk about God. No, it's not like that. It's a very friendly environment where people can self-identify or identify with others about a common problem, and that is a powerful thing. Okay, I think the next one is my last slide. I think this is a really important slide, right? So this is the friends and family. Sometimes that's the biggest thing to do. Listen and don't judge. And that's really hard if it's a loved one. You know, my parents, even when I was in my 50s and it was this. When the finger comes out, no one's listening, don't you? And that's why it's good to talk to someone who understands. Be present. If you don't know the answer, just say you don't. Sometimes just a solid, anchored presence can be comforting to someone who's struggling. But we're kind of wired to want to give the answers, even if we don't know the answers. I know now, if I don't know, I just say, I don't know the answer, but let's find someone who does. So just being calm is an important message. This last one, I think, is really interesting, because it's kind of paradoxical that sometimes the people closest to us, my loved ones, they were the voices I didn't want to hear. They were either part of the problem, or I felt too ashamed to talk about it with them. And I have this conversation with parents a lot. Why won't my son and my daughter listen to me? Because you've lost the voice with them temporarily. And they're too ashamed to admit that. And sometimes the kindest, wisest thing to do is to guide them to someone they will listen to. Whether that's a family friend, another service or not. And it's extremely hard to do, I know that. I have this conversation all the time. But it's important to think about that. What's the right thing for the person you get? And I think it's also an important message, because the more that this message gets into the community, there's understanding that this is really about connections, because someone who's struggling with drugs and alcohol, they've lost connection with themselves. They've lost connection with what matters. They've lost connection with people. And we all need connections to get by in this world and do the best we can. So I think that was my last slide. Yeah. But Kevin's going to do a bit now, and then we'll be back on for some questions at the end. Okay. Thank you.